And today on the show, we're going to do something a little bit different. It's just Kelly and I on the show today. So Kelly, thanks for joining me.
Oh, always glad to join, especially when there's exciting news to talk about.
Yeah, we want to talk about something that you may or may not have seen that we announced a few weeks ago, which was that we have made our first major acquisition, and we acquired the ProcureTech100 program and the Founders Circle event series, something that we're really excited about. We wanted to talk a little bit about what those are today and why we did it and what it means and what we're hoping to build.
Absolutely. As well as, how this fits into all of the content that we're already creating. Certainly our philosophy on procurement and content get to stay the same, but it sort of gives us a whole new avenue of topics and approaches to content and ways to pull in the community that I actually think are going to make everything that we're already doing that much more interesting.
Yeah, it's, we've been doing, as we've talked about, Art of Procurement now for 10 years. And, it continues to be a journey, and we continue to look about how can we best serve the procurement community, and that changes as the world around us changes. Some things change, some things stay the same. We continue to look at new ways that we can just bring interesting insights. And this just seemed like, it's a program that we've known about for a long time. So,
yes.
We can talk a little bit about the program to start. I can go back all the way. So the program was the ProcureTech100 and the Founders Circle, both started by Lance Younger. Lance has worked in and around procurement for an awful long time in a lot of executive roles from a chief procurement officer perspective, also from consulting and advisory perspective, and really brought all that to found ProcureTech. I think it was around 2021 timeframe. I spoke with Lance before when he was thinking about putting something together, and we kind of shared some ideas and thoughts. He launched the ProcureTech100 and ProcureTech as a business about that same time. And I think the goal in forming ProcureTech was this, seeing the change that was going to come to procurement in terms of digitalization and the need for digitalization, or for procurement leaders to embrace digitalization. And so to create a resource that helped them do so. And that was really the genesis of the programs, but also the consulting and the advisory work that Lance and his team did, that ultimately he sold that part of the business to Oro in March, I think, of this year.
Well, and it's interesting when you look back to 2021, right, assuming that's sort of the starting line. So it definitely predates sort of the fervor we're having over AI right now. Mm-hmm. But I think even then, and you can sort of fact check me here, I think that was very early days, even for intake and orchestration, which are sort of the other two huge digital things that have completely changed the way that procurement approaches everything digital.
It was just as we were starting to see this explosion of investment in the procurement space. We'd gone through the worst of COVID and all the disruptions related to COVID that had brought procurement and supply chain to the fore, and probably this realization that the function of procurement and supply chain was underinvested in from a venture capital perspective. And so you started to see a lot of money coming into companies in the space. As you start to see that, I think it was the early days of, for example, Epstein's spider chart, and it was much smaller spider chart than it became.
But you probably didn't need a magnifying glass back then.
You just started to get this explosion of new companies, and it was just kind of before that. So Lance obviously saw that coming and wanted to found ProcureTech as a way of collecting kind of all this information and insight around the ecosystem that was growing. And that's what became the ProcureTech100 program, which essentially is a program that there's a lot of kind of data and judging from panels of CPOs, heads of digital procurement, heads of center of excellence, that kind of level of procurement leaders that goes into identifying, who are 100 different companies that we should know about as procurement leaders that are helping to redefine what's possible in the procurement space. And at its highest level, that's kind of what the ProcureTech100 is. There's a lot that goes in to creating that, but that's probably the headline of what the 100 program is.
But it's very procurement for procurement. Like, it's funny, I was thinking about it, sort of listening to you describe it. And of course, we've been digging into some of the data and things behind the scenes. But it's very much, if you think about a typical RFP, right? There's the quantitative pieces, like the factual inputs provided from all different sources, some of it company provided, some of it independent third party. But then there's that incredibly important peer element where it's not just, what fits into the squares on a spreadsheet. It's also, what do people with real boots on the ground experience implementing digital solutions and trying to achieve procurement objectives, bringing in that more subjective point of view at the same time. So it's very sort of like based on a sourcing mindset.
Yeah, one of the things we want to do is we want to open the doors, if you will, to show how the 100 and everything around the 100 comes to be and how the companies are selected that are in the 100. But at a high level, there is, you're starting with, you think about the world of companies in the procurement and supply chain space, and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies. I think in the ProcureTech provider directory, there's something like 750 companies as a starting point. Essentially, you're taking data on all of those different, and let's say it's 750 companies just for the sake of the discussion, taking lots of data that's available from third parties and running that through kind of a scoring mechanism based on the data and the importance of certain fields of that data to then come to a shortlist. And then that shortlist is posed to panels of CPOs and heads of digital procurement to then talk about the individual solutions and their experience with those before then coming down to the final 100. And you talked then about the peer elements. I think that's what's really the most important part of this. And that was the most attractive to us as a business when we thought about ProcureTech100, is that it really becomes the voice of the user. It's the voice of the customer. There's lots of places we can go for opinions and perspectives based on what technology says it can do or should be able to do. But we really want the perspective of those who are using it every day, or who have done proof of concepts and trialed certain tools, who have seen what the ROI is, or they've seen how easy or difficult it is to customize or to implement. That's the kind of insight that really we want to drive the intelligence around ProcureTech to help us all kind of learn from each other.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because, yes, I know that the results in the past have been announced at various types of events, but it all also culminates in this really impressive yearbook, which is a fantastic thing, even now to look back at the last couple of years and see sort of how that asset evolved and what were the storylines that were included in there, in addition to, of course, the 100 companies. Everybody wants to see that. But even the procurement journey as carried out by the content in that yearbook is interesting as well.
It's interesting seeing how the 100 evolves, as you said, year over year as things change. And, with all the change that we're going through now, it'll be interesting to see, how many legacy providers are in that 100 list versus how many startups that it's like it's never been easier to start a startup than it is right now. Now we'll probably look back in a couple of years and say, was that a good thing or a not very good thing? But we are seeing things pop up all over the place. And how many of those are going to find themselves, very rapidly growing and being adopted or being trialed and therefore featured in things like the ProcureTech100 yearbook?
Yeah. Now, we've talked about ProcureTech100 and we've talked about the yearbook. Those two very much go hand in hand. But we haven't really dug in at all to the Founders Circle, which is sort of a different piece of all of this. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that is or how it works and sort of how it fits into this goal around keeping people up to date on solutions?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this is really all about community. And the ProcureTech100 is about community. It's about bringing together the CPOs, the heads of procurement, the heads of digital procurement together to talk about all the solutions and the solutions they're using or the solutions that they're thinking about. Founders Circle is really just an in-person extension of that community. It's a regular event series, which goes, so far it's been around the US and around Europe, where it brings together, a small number of practitioner leaders with founders, with heads of product at the companies that we're all using, but also from startups as well, to really talk about, what's on the practitioner side, what they're looking for, what they need in their tech stack that doesn't exist, what's missing, or what have we tried that hasn't really worked and why didn't it work, or what are some of the challenges we're having. And on the other side, the founders want to kind of listen to the challenges, because it's almost like it's a brief to build something to support, to help procurement leaders overcome the challenges they've got with the current tech stack, but also for founders to say, hey, did you know that this is coming? Or did you know that this is kind of what this category of technology can do, or may be able to do in a year or 2 years or whatever. This is kind of what we're keeping an eye on. So there's this exchange of information so that both founders and practitioners are kind of helping each other to build tools that ultimately benefit us all.
I think that keeping people on top of what's coming next has to be an incredibly important piece of it, because when I think even now, whether it's a white paper or it's a webinar, as we talk about different aspects of what AI can do for procurement, like for instance, now as we're getting more and more into the agents and how those can be used in the process, you almost feel the need to start every conversation by like, okay, everybody, just to clarify, generative AI writes funny emails in the voice of a pirate, right? Agentic AI is different. It will actually go do work for you, and it's more sort of programming based. It's hard to tell where everybody is generally within the community around their level of understanding. And then if they know what it is, do they have a vision for where it can be plugged in? I have to think those informal exchanges at the Founders Circle are really critical for sort of gauging the understanding in both directions.
Yeah, and I think, when I think about what the acquisition means for Art of Procurement, it's really about creating this always-on source for what we're calling peer-driven insight, which is, peers, procurement leaders who are using or who have challenges or taking advantage of opportunities are kind of sharing that insight. And then that gets built into the unbiased ProcureTech intelligence that we have through this program and through the data in the program, but also through the judging process through the program. And then that turns into executive level collaboration, whether that's in Founders Circle or the Catalyst events that we've now started to run. So we end up kind of supporting and being the go-to place for that peer-driven insight. So that's whether that's the podcasts, the white papers, all the data and information and insights that comes out of all the conversations that we have. The intelligence is the formalizing of this program and then starting to make data available based on the judging and based on the data that we're actually accessing from the program. Then we get to talk about that with everybody in person and share the stories and turn these data points and these insights into action. And then helping from a digitization enablement perspective, go and put all those into practice. And that's really ultimately what we're trying to build with AOP.
Yeah. And I do think, you talked about the peer-driven piece being absolutely essential to sort of our vision around what this can become as part of Art of Procurement. I personally think that objectivity piece is a very close second, because I think having people be able to trust the information and know that all of the source material is coming from the right place, that, nobody's swinging by your house and sort of dropping off a fruit basket and that's how you make it onto the list. Nope, that is not how it works. I think procurement is always sort of like on the lookout for something not being totally above board. And so the reputation for objectivity that we're getting and that we're getting to carry forward, I think that's a huge piece of what preserves the value of the ProcureTech 100 recommendations.
Yeah, and anybody who knows me knows that French fries are probably the better way to go than a fruit basket.
With a Diet Coke on the side.
A few Diet Cokes on the side.
6-pack of Diet Coke and some French fries. That will get you to number one in any category of software you want to be listed in.
I think that programs like this live or die based on their objectivity and the unbiased nature of it and the independence. I think something that's really important to us on the program is that our role is not to be a judge. Our role is not to say provider A should be in this short list of tools in a particular segment versus provider B. We're curating, kind of collecting and curating the insights, the knowledge, the experience of all those judges in the program, plus the data points that we collect from third parties. Because, if we were involved in the judging and had opinions on the judging, then, rightly or not, we could be allegations of, well, what is their favoritism there? Or you've worked on a certain thing or a sponsor at an event and is now in the 100. That's obviously a no-go area for us. So, the clearest way for us to make sure that we avoid anything like that is that we don't have any role whatsoever in the actual judging and who gets chosen by the judges in the program.
And given how impressive these judges are, I know a lot of those names are public from the past. We're very lucky to say that there are friends on that list. So not everybody is new to us, but we're excited to meet the people that we haven't worked with yet. There's absolutely no need for you and I to weigh in, given how incredible these judges and panelists are.
100%. The experience that we have through the judging panel And, and likely we'll open those panels up to more. If you are interested in putting your name forward, you can always get in touch with us at the normal channels. But, people on that, lots and lots and lots of folks in those judging panels that have, decades of experience within procurement, with leading procurement teams, with selecting procurement technology, from companies who are the largest companies in the world to companies who are smaller and growing, in growth mode. It's really important that there's a lot of diversity across judges, both from a industry, from a size, from a geography perspective. And so we're going to be looking at the judging panels in terms of making sure that we keep that diversity, because that's ultimately what drives the value of the outputs, I think, from the panels.
Yeah. And it's also not looking at tech in isolation. I mean, certainly when the focus is on one of the 10 specific technology categories, that's sort of at the center of the conversation, but bringing in those executive practitioner voices, make sure we're always keeping a focus on, and so what, right? So what does this mean for talent? What does this mean for productivity? What does it mean for procurement's priorities? There always has to be an understanding, especially given, we've talked about AI, all of the different shifts around operating model and how we're going to spend our time. This all very much goes hand in hand. I think that's part of what's so key about having their perspective on the platforms.
Yeah, I think our view of the world remains the same. The operating model comes first. Technology is a driver of operating model. So technology can change operating model. But you don't buy technology for buying technology's sake. It's, how does this fit? How do we make it fit? What's kind of the end goal? What's the vision of how this all connects with the people side, with the process side? That's a lot of the things that are just so up in, not in limbo, but that are open to change right now, because technology is enabling us to do things that it didn't enable us to do before. Yeah. So that's the lens through which we look at this program. It's not, you're going to buy technology because you want to buy some new technology. It's the, why are you going to do it? And this just brings in so much more insight that helps kind of inform a lot of the content that we'll work on, that helps kind of give more ideas, or that just kind of allows us to take a bigger picture look at the impact of technology, not just in isolation.
And so obviously this is going to come in and help us connect with the community in different ways. It's certainly going to become an increasingly strong thread through our content. We also have Spend Pros as sort of an advisory practice. Yeah. To what extent do you think our involvement, especially when you start thinking about founder circle and some of the relationships with the panelists even potentially, how does this start to affect some of the work that we do on the advisory side?
Yeah, I think that, more to come as we figure out exactly what that's going to look like. But I think that what this does is it gives us an opportunity to offer some really focused and targeted consulting and advisory piece of business around digitization enablement. Yeah. Get the insights that we're able to get access to. We're kind of exponential in terms of where we are today from a technology perspective, on what's working, what's not working, advice on building your kind of tech stack, running RFPs for technology, things like that. We'll also already have so much information as we're advising clients to go and do that. So I do see that there'll be, more kind of more kind of focus is the right word. More focus on the digitization enablement side of advisory. Yeah. But I'd say more to come on that as we get our arms around what all this looks like.
Yeah. And we're still very early days, right? And so we sort of know just enough to be excited about the potential of it. Yeah. But this isn't also going to be just an AOP team project. So we've talked about the panelists. We're very excited about getting to know that community better. Obviously, all of the founders that in the past have participated, or new founders that will come in and join us. But we actually have a number of ways that different people can participate in all of what we have going on, some of which are already up on our site. We have sort of a press release with an FAQ in there. But what are some of the different ways that either providers or practitioners can get involved with the ProcureTech100, the Yearbook Founder Circle, all of that, what's involved there?
Yeah, I would say at the moment, the best thing to do is go to the show notes for today's podcast, and there'll be a couple of links in there. One, if you're a practitioner. One, if you're a provider that wants to be considered as part of the program. For the provider side, we'll be having a link where you can kind of fill out a form with some information about yourself that you want to be considered by the judges. There'll just be some pretty simple RFI type questions. We're not trying to make this too burdensome, but at the same time, it's the best way for us to get additional information about who you are, what you do, who you serve, so that we can share that with judges as we go through the judging process. So there'll be a link for that. On the flip side, for a practitioner side, if you're a CPO listening to this, if you're a head of procurement, you run procurement excellence, you are responsible for buying procurement technology, and you're in working within a procurement department within a company today, then reach out to us and ask about being a judge. What do we need to be a judge? We've got a few slots that are open for judges. I'm not sure if we'll probably be a point in time where we're going to cap the number for this first year. But if that's something that's of interest of you, there'll also be a link to express your interest in being a judge for the program this year. From a timing perspective, ProcureTech100 has typically come out, I think, in about the November timeframe. We're here recording this in the middle of August, and so we're probably going to have the operations in you, Kelly. If anyone's looking at video, there's suddenly a look of horror coming across your face.
I suddenly seem faint. That's why.
Yeah. There's definitely some compressed timelines, to make sure that we continue to get the program out in the time of year that it's always been out. But that's the kind of time frame for results that we're looking at, is the November time frame. Most likely tied in with the Catalyst New York City event that we just recently announced, which will be on November the 18th. So there may be something related to Catalyst, but that's the timing that we're kind of looking for.
So actually, maybe there's another tie-in opportunity here. If somebody is going to be in the New York City area and they want to bring the Diet Coke and the French fries to Carnegie Hall, that's a backup option if Florida doesn't happen to be a convenient location for you.
Yeah, well, that will be too late for the 2025 program, but maybe that will help in the 2026 program. But no, we will be in New York on November 18th. We're looking at doing something potentially the day before as well, but that's not been finalized yet. But if you're interested, you're on the practitioner side and you want to join us at Catalyst as we bring that from LA and the successful event that we had in LA in May to New York City at Carnegie Hall in November, then we will have some content at Catalyst related to the ProcureTech100 and the judging of the ProcureTech100 as well.
Well, it's easy to be excited about this. Of course, as I'm just out of eye shot is my clipboard, which is already sort of groaning under the weight of all the stuff that we're going to do. But it's, it's a good, exciting kind of work. It's really awesome, not just to have made an acquisition, but to be getting into something so new and that there's so much positive energy around. People have been amazing as we made announcements on LinkedIn or through our email list. It's been really rewarding to hear not just that people are so excited for Art of Procurement, but that they clearly recognize sort of the synergy and the positive brand recognition and respect that go with the ProcureTech100. So it's a very exciting point to be standing at.
Yeah, I mean, the overwhelming response has been related to the ProcureTech100 program and the Founders Circle has been happiness and relief that those programs will continue.
Yes.
And I think that certainly folks have shared with us their happiness that we are good custodians in terms of how we will continue to grow, build, and bring these insights to the community that are really needed. And as entrepreneurs, I think as exciting as we continue to evolve and grow what Art of Procurement is, it's just a few more late nights, but I'm sure we'd have found something else to spend, to do some late nights anyway, because, that's what goes into building a business.
I know that's what you do. And if you don't love that part, then none of this is going to work anyway. So nice to have a big focus project to put that energy into.
Well, I never go to bed on a Sunday night thinking, I've got to wake up on Monday and get depressed. So, it's all good fun. And, we enjoy kind of building and just seeing what more value we can bring for everybody.
Awesome. And this is just the next step of that journey.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you very much for listening in. And, if you have any comments, questions, ideas about ProcureTech100, that you've observed in the past and Founders Circle, now is a great time to let us know. We're all ears as we continue to build and grow the programs. But I think that's a wrap. We'll go back to working on getting the 2025 program up and running and out there.
Not a moment to waste.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks a lot for joining us, everybody. And we will talk again soon. Take care, everybody.